All right, everyone. Thanks for being here, and welcome back to another episode of SOC Quarantine Diaries. I am so pleased to be joined today by an old friend, a veteran of the industry, Eddie Schwartz. Eddie is CSO of Block.One, which is a blockchain solutions company. Eddie, how are you?
I'm really good, Dan. It's great to connect with you again after what seems like a number of years, and great to be part of your webcast here.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I mentioned, you have a very impressive resume in the security industry, and I had to scroll a long ways down on LinkedIn to get through everything. I think the last time that you and I had been in touch was you were founder and CSO of NetWitness.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
that was in the late 2000s. And then you moved over to being CSO of RSA, the security division of EMC, then did some professorship work, ISACA, and then you were at Dark Matter, which was a security company. And now you've found your way to Block.One, and you've been there for about 18 months. Is that a relatively good synopsis of what you've been up to?
Yeah, it's a good synopsis. Block.One is, as you mentioned, we were the developers of an open source blockchain software. And the reason I came here is just because I feel like blockchain is one of the next things. People talk about AI and machine learning and blockchain. And, I think for a security person, you're always looking for, what's the next thing that's going to hit us, both in terms of the really good stuff, but also the things we need to protect. And so, that's why I'm so excited about, what we're trying to get done here.
Yeah, and on the blockchain side of things, I think I know exactly what it is and how it works, right? But then I can confuse myself pretty quickly. So I know what it is, I swear, but tell me exactly what it is and the role that your company plays.
Well, what I always tell people to think about is, think of blockchain as an immutable or an unchangeable ledger. So suppose there was something that you wanted, just an unchangeable, undeniable record of a series of transactions. For example, let's say you had a car and you bought, the car was manufactured, the car was transferred to a dealer, now it was owned by somebody. And then there were transactions throughout the life of the vehicle. Wouldn't it be nice if you could be absolutely certain that there was an unchangeable record of those transactions, or anything really, whether it was financial transactions, transactions of a DMV, insurance? There's sort of a million applications of blockchain, and it really is that ability to cryptographically seal in an immutable way records of transactions or records of things that we need to do, where we can go back and replay it and say, this for sure was Dan Kaplan interacting with this database, signing this record, and everything that happened, even if you transferred that to somebody else, was then the continuance of the record of that asset or that whatever it is that you're doing on the chain.
I see. And the work that you do, I would imagine, because the blockchain is what it is, and it scales in the way it does, and there's mass popularity around it, that there is some interest from a bad guy point of view to disrupt some of it.
Yeah, so what's cool about blockchain is some of the blockchain approaches are decentralized. So the neat thing about it is, there's not necessarily, it's not true in all blockchains, but there's not necessarily like a single point of failure where, if you hit one node, everything is bad and everything goes down and the hackers steal everything. But, there certainly is a lot of interest because blockchain is becoming a place where financial services companies are placing transactions. Certainly it's a place where a lot of cryptocurrency exists today. We know about Bitcoin. A lot of people associate. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And in the future, it will be a place where a lot of things we really care about are going to exist. And so it is important for us as security professionals to think about it and to think about it as part of our jobs. Even if we are not at a blockchain company, we might work at a bank, or we might work at a healthcare company, or a retail company where their database or their system of record will be a blockchain-based system in the future. And we as security people are going to have to understand, how do we deal with the security of the blockchain, and how does it improve the security if we do it the right way?
Yeah, and some interesting stuff. I'm sure some unique security risks that are associated, and hopefully we'll get to that. So let me back up a bit, and
Yeah.
the premise of these episodes are rooted in the quarantine and everything that's been going on with the COVID-19 pandemic, and the genesis of the show, if you will, started to sort of understand how organizations and specifically security professionals have been disrupted by all that has gone on. So I always ask personally, we're 5-6 months into this now, and life doesn't show any propensity to return to normal for quite a while. How are you doing, Eddie? How are you handling everything?
Well, I'm doing well. I mean, as you can imagine, like most people, I think the lack of being able to touch things like family members that are far away, or being able to interact at the water cooler with people is really tough. Not being able to sit in a room and chat with the team sometimes is really difficult as well, or see far away family members, as I mentioned. But I think that
cons and all that as well.
Yeah. I mean, doing Black Hat, virtually, and I've recently spoke at Hack in the Box Singapore, where I would normally be, and talking to Dylan, remotely. It was sort of like, it was tough. But I mean, having said that, I think certainly this is true for people that are in an engineering background, as well as people that are working in non-technical jobs. I think many of us have adapted well to Zoom is your friend, and WebEx is your friend, and all these things are your friend. And really starting to have more sessions where you get together with people and love, and talk to them. So I've certainly been doing that. I know you wanted to talk about how is this different from a team perspective. We've been doing that in my teams too. We try to see each other virtually, but we try not to overdo it too, if you know what I mean. Because I think you can also get into meeting madness, where now everybody feels like, oh, I need to see you, otherwise I don't know if you're working. And,
right.
You wouldn't do that at work. So, you don't want to lose track of the fact that you actually do trust the people you work with, and, not necessarily be demanding to see their face on Zoom all day long,
And when all the stay-at-home orders came down, and Block.One is a relatively new company, new venture.
Right.
In my experience, talking to those companies, a lot of those companies were very, very remote friendly already previously.
Correct.
Block.One, not as much. There was quite a bit of physical in the office work going on, so it probably was quite a transition.
So interestingly, because we have offices in Virginia, and then we had a couple of offices in Asia, we already were sort of used to this thing where early in the morning or late at night, you're having to interact with your peers, whether it's, in various support functions or control functions or engineering functions at odd hours over, Google Meet or Zoom or whatever technology we were using. And so we had kind of developed a capability already that you had this, and one side or the other was typically at home or really late in the office. So when it came down that the offices had to close in one place or another, we kind of already had a culture that was prepared for that. I think nobody was prepared for, the true lockdown from a personal perspective, but from a technology perspective, we actually were kind of used to the fact that, I got to have a meeting at 9 o'clock at night from home because I've got somebody, it's 9 a.m. in Hong Kong,
Did your team itself, how did they adapt to the I'm sure, is your team largely working from home still, or have there been some?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we have some occasions where somebody needs to go in the office for one thing or another, but it's actually exception based still for us completely. I mean, for our offices, pretty much right now, most of our offices are still closed. So, I mean, definitely there are challenges in certain functions within security. And I also own infrastructure and IT in our company. So, we have vast cloud operations and other things that we do. And, there are situations where you're trying to troubleshoot something, or you're dealing with an incident where, certainly where you would put everybody in a room and get on a whiteboard, have a sort of situation room or something like that, not only for security incidents, but, let's say network downtime or something like that. It is a little more challenging to get used to do that over a virtual call. But again, I think the teams have adapted well to it and, have figured out ways to deal with things like that.
Right. And the team was responsible, of course, with getting itself set up and comfortable, but also probably had quite a bit of burden to ensure that the rest of the organization was ready to work from home securely, right? Can you talk about that?
Yes, definitely we did a lot of homework around, ensuring that we really understood everyone that was, logging into our systems, connecting into our systems, because as you can imagine, it went through our head that, when everybody's in the office, we sort of understood that profile in terms of, quote, the network, right? But I think when you're suddenly having every single employee connecting from, network addresses, from domains you've never seen before, and, essentially trusted connections, it became a lot more complicated. The other thing that I think comes up with people is, people talk about VPNs versus other types of connections. We had to make decisions around how do we really allow access, because it's, as you probably know, a lot of environments, particularly in companies like ours that are startups, it really isn't about, you log into a network and all of your stuff is there. In the modern world, you're dealing with a lot of SaaS vendors. And really, it's when you connect to the network, you're really actually connecting to an aggregate of lots of SaaS vendors that are all in different places. So it's less about connecting to a VPN where everything is magically available for you, and more about managing a multitude of connections. And now access to that multitude of connections is done from a multitude of homes. So, we really look closely at, do we understand how to manage cloud services properly, how to manage both authentication, and user, user IDs in that environment. And I think we, like many organizations, we moved to a completely zero trust approach. And, I think, I don't know.
That happened after all this went down.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember John Kindervag that used to work at Forrester. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still remember the days when he was pitching this whole zero trust model, that he actually coined the term zero trust at Forrester back in the old days. This is how old I am. And, now everybody is like, zero trust, zero trust. Well, yeah, now it's actually playing out that this is what you want to be doing, because it really isn't about connecting into your safe and secure network. It really is about zero trust, and you're connecting many to many, and you really don't know what is what anymore. And that's the situation that we had to manage, and I'm sure that's true for anyone else in my position today.
Yeah, and I know that over the years you've been such a really great commentator on the globalization, professionalization of threats going on. You've been called by media sources to talk about WannaCry and a lot of these made from a threat perspective. What has, because a lot of companies are reporting that alerts went up and events went up as a result of is that something that you experienced? And if so, what kind of stuff are you guys seeing? And how is your team handling that potential rise?
So I think industry-wide, and we were not exempt from that. At the beginning of all of this, there was a big rise in, let's call it, various types of COVID-related interest in companies, right? And they varied from sort of this tsunami of generalized spam, where you had sort of the, hey, here's the latest update on what's going on from the CDC or WHO or the local Asian health authorities, and
right.
And people were nervous, right? Everybody was nervous, so you sort of had to go back to, hey, remember the training, remember what we taught all of you, the escalations and all of this. And again, we were fairly lucky because our people had a lot of experience with being spearfished by us directly and, constantly being hammered. That's not to say, by the way, that things didn't get through, or, things don't happen in organizations like ours or any organization. But I think What we also saw is there was a wave of this stuff and a wave of attacks. And, you know, after a while, everybody saw so many of them, they started to just think that all of it was false. You know, I think the bad guys kind of overdid it in the sense of, you know, how many emails a day can you get for masks when there were no masks, that people after a while just started to say, all right, I get it. These really aren't ads for masks. These are bad guys getting me to click on something, you know? Mm-hmm. So yeah, we definitely saw an uptick in different types of, you know, interests. And we saw that from our partners as well. Our partners sent emails to us saying, you know, watch out for this. It may look like something that's coming from us, but it's really from a bad guy, you know. But, you know, that kind of after, I guess towards the end of June, that kind of trickled off. And, you know, we still see some of it, but not in the volume that we saw at the beginning of all this.
Yeah. And, you know, I had obviously kind of these, they're not new risks, but they probably were quite a bit empowered by the situation, risks like related to VPNs and all that. I've heard of a lot of organizations having to deal with that, and as a result kind of come up with new response playbooks for dealing with those. Anything on your end there with some new stuff that you had to take particularly seriously?
You know, honestly, I guess new, you know, it was mostly topical in nature versus, you know, net new types of attacks that we hadn't seen, you know, before in some form or another, just rolled up a little differently, if that makes sense, you know. Mm-hmm. I think it's typical that you would see, for example, you know, some sort of water holding type attacks, you know, where they try to draw everybody to a weak spot, and then, hey, like, you know, once you're here, then there's some malware served or something like that. You know, we would typically see those things, but rolled a bit differently. I don't know that there was, you know, anything that was completely net new, like, oh, gee, we've never seen anything like this before, as much as just a new way of rolling an old problem.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering if there's anything that you got more formalized around or more specific around, you know, that kind of used to show up a little bit, but now is showing up a lot.
Yeah, I guess the main thing was just maybe formalizing a bit more our process for reporting certain types of things. You know, we always had a reporting process if somebody was worried about something. But one of the things that we enabled for users that was really valuable to us is we made it easier for them to simply click a button and report something. And we embedded that button for them. And so, you know, so we made it easier for user to just simply go like this if they suspected an issue. And then we narrowed the response time for our SOC team to get back to people, and from an SLA perspective. So I think that was really valuable, because, you know, sometimes when people say, well, is it this email address, or what do I do with this? Or, you know, do I put it on Slack, or do I, you know, it's like, yeah, well, now we don't want that down, you know, so if you put a big red button, you know, push here, you know, push here in case of emergency, you know, that's usually a lot easier.
When in doubt, the big red buttons always seem to work. Eddie, speaking of the SOC teams, you know, that's our core audience at Siemplify, and you know, I'm just wondering if folks who work in the SOC, of all the professions within security, they're probably most used to working in proximity of one another, right? You know, you imagine that windowless SOC, that dark, low ceiling SOC, they gather around a monitor and talk to each other.
All the guided tours go there.
Yeah, right. Right. It's a good way to show off, kind of flex the muscles of the security arm of the company. It's cool to see that's not that's not happening right now. All those SOC analysts are home. So how are they coping with things?
It's definitely more challenging, for sure. I mean, there's an absolute benefit. You know, you see it in the movies all the time too, right? I mean, there's an absolute benefit of having people in an operations center where humans can say, look at this on my screen, right? And, you know, of course you can do that virtually, right? Of course you can, you know, I can share a screen with you right now, right? I mean, we can share screens with each other, but sometimes you have things on multiple screens and you want people to say, well, look at this, and then look at this, and look at this. And there's definitely some adjustment that certainly adds a bit more time and adds a bit more complexity to the discussion, than when you're in a, quote, situation room or an operations center, and you can just bring stuff up on multiple screens and you can say, well, let's talk through this, or, let's draw out a workflow on the board while we're talking about what's on the screen here. But I think, I guess the best way to describe it to you is, as you deal with issues that come up, the team adapts, right? So it's not like anyone knew exactly how to do this in the moment of truth, as much as the team knew each other and how to work together, and they adapted their in-person process to the virtual environment, and they adapted things like working through an L3 issue, doing threat hunting, doing other things over time, right? So, I think now, it's like anything else. Now, if you said, well, how do you do that, right? Certainly our senior director of security operations could sit down and say, well, the next time, you had to do a virtual SOC, this is how you would do it. But, it definitely was a learning curve for us,
Yeah. So I'm wondering that collaboration element, there's ways to do it though. There's ways to virtually, overcome some of those hurdles. And then I'm wondering if automation, increasing automation throughout security, but in the SOC itself, if that's something that you guys have been worked to implement more,
it's really
considering
important.
all the alerts and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we were already on the path of, increasing our analytics. As you know, from my background, analytics is like a big thing for me, right?
Oh, yeah.
Our SOC head, was really from an analytics background. And so he and his team, working with our infrastructure and IT teams, already had gone down the path of doing a lot of dashboards, a lot of analytics, really looking at, essentially, like many SOCs, using the MITRE ATT&CK model, and then just, knocking off use cases against that model, but building that, through analytics where we could. And where, some of them maybe were, let's say, more difficult to do, through analytics because of the complexity, at least then having ways to connect the dots in other manners with, human interaction. I think, one of the things that's, frankly difficult, when security marketing versus security reality, right? It's easy to talk about sort of a generic set of analytics that, you could do. When you get down to the specificity of company A and company B, building analytics does become, something that security teams really have to focus on, that's specific to the business and then specific to the capability of the tools that you're using to build those analytics. So, but we've been doing a lot of that. We did some of it obviously way before all the stuff hit, but we're continuing to try to fine tune that perspective. And I do think even if this all went away tomorrow, we continue to build more analytics, and that's going to be till the end of time, Yeah.
So, the question of where, because you're seeing that budgets are obviously, have to kind of deal with the same repercussions as the overall corporate budget from, the security budgets are, nothing is going to, rise beyond kind of what the average is, I guess. But security budgets still probably are going to see an increase, right? At least that's what I'm seeing.
They've been increasing since I've been in the business, right? So I think one of the things to consider is this, and this is something I'm sure Art Coviello. So he and I worked on this when I was at RSA. One of the things that has always been sort of an issue in security is, what do you spend on prevent and detect, and what do you spend on respond, right? And we kind of did, I can't tell you all the details because I don't even know what's public or not anymore, but the thing is this, what we found is that the traditional security views of prevent and detect always were problematic, in that, security teams had spent so much on, policies and, things that really didn't provide enough value. If you my belief personally, and, I've felt this way for a long time now, is that if you do security by design, by moving as much security to the left as you can in the quote prevent bucket, where you're really deep into DevSecOps, you're doing 100% threat modeling and code review, you're doing automated analysis there. So you get code as clean as you can coming into the pipeline. Then you really spend also as a percentage, instead of 20% detect, you're putting at least 35% in detect, building analytics, doing forensics, doing the, like the net witness stuff we did, the stuff, we used to do in the SIM world and analytics world, and really having a great SOC, a great detection team. That's your bang for the buck, because if you missed anything in the left, you've got to detect it. It doesn't matter how good you've done, on your ProdSec. If you can't detect it, that's the ultimate test. So
that's where the security investments have been trending. Is there did COVID-19 shuffle anything up more? Like I'm seeing a lot of folks are, obviously cloud security is going to get quite a big piece of the pie. IAM, that sort of stuff.
Well, I think one of the things also, I guess, is sort of how you do cloud security is really important, and where you do it, right? So from my perspective in general, security analytics historically, has been sort of a log-based log analytics thing where, you just can't do that anymore really in the cloud world. In the cloud world, you really have to move more towards an agent-based approach, because if you think about logs are traditionally associated with an asset that you understand where that asset is, you understand what it is, and you can track it. Whereas if you're building things, in a DevOps world, in a 100% cloud world today, or mostly cloud world today, things are generally built with infrastructure as code, where also all of the security can exist as code. So you can have security, essentially build all your security telemetry as a code-based agent, build it into the container. So when that container comes out the other end, whatever it looks like, all of the security needs that you have that might feed a SIM or an analytics engine or whatever it is today is essentially baked. So you don't have to worry, how do I point the logs at this or that? That's the thing of the past, and really everything that comes out of the pipeline is already reporting on compliance and reporting on, hey, I'm this, and I'm reporting in, and, here's my status, and here's what I'm doing. And, it's all designed in that way, when it comes out of the pipeline into production. And that's not a small thing to do, but that's also why I say, the time that we invest figuring that out in ProdSec ultimately also benefits the SOC. And so I wouldn't say that's a COVID change as much as a change that if we, if you're not doing that, it's harder. It's harder in this environment, where we're all disconnected to ask these questions like, well, wait a minute, what are you guys spinning up here? And how do I track it in the SOC? It's a philosophical change that people need to make. If the SOC team is chasing assets versus having the assets or chase the SOC, mm-hmm. It's sort of problematic in this world.
Going back to cloud, obviously a lot of companies are, a lot of cloud applications are being relied upon now to within the remote working world. Security plays a role in those. So is there, because Microsoft just did a survey around and talked a little bit about digital empathy rising, and is security being embraced by users more because they realize it is intertwined with their ability to be productive? Do you think, I guess I'm wondering what some silver linings that may come out of all this for security?
Yeah, I think, I guess the way I think about security is I don't think about it as much as it certainly is a department where we work, right? But I don't really I don't really think about it in the traditional sense anymore. Like, for example, with our product security team, security wears the same t-shirts as engineering. They're part of the Scrum teams. They're part of literally everything that happens in terms of building the product. So it's not even about sort of embracing them. It's just that they're part of it. They're just part of it. You know, I want to get to the point where developers and security people are interchangeable. That's my goal with that team. I think with the SOC, what I'm heading towards, and you know, hopefully by the time I retire, I'll make security go away completely. What I want to get to with the SOC team is that cloud operations and tech ops and security operations is all a big thing where it's really hard to tell the difference among all of them because they're so uniquely intertwined and they're so, their objectives are so together that, you know, you really can't tell the difference. Now, do I mean that there isn't a security SME that understands malware better than the guy that understands DNS over here? No, I'm not saying that. Right? But having said that, what many of my peers and I are finding is that in a DevSecOps world, those distinctions of being on, you know, the green team is this and this team is that, they're really going away where, you know, if you're seen as the security team, oh my gosh, here they come. You know, it's not going to be as beneficial for you as, you know, everybody owns the issue. We all own the issue together, you know, and that's why I think, you know, and this is important for anyone in security. If you're not, if you're in an environment that is a DevOps environment, if you're not DevSecOps, you'll be irrelevant in a few years, you know?
Yeah. So that's a culture thing that needs to be instilled, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
But I think it makes us more effective at our jobs too, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I'm finding that anyway.
Okay. Man, it is weird times though going on right now. And what are you talking with your peers regularly, just kind of about what they're experiencing right now, and how this is all impacting their?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Mostly, to be honest with you, mostly peers either at partner companies we work with or in the community that we operate in. You know, because blockchain is a new area for me in the last 2+ years. So, you know, I'm still learning the ropes, so to speak. I mean, blockchain is a new thing, you know, relative to other things, right? Last 7-8 years, you know, in terms of, you know, real adoption and so on. So, well, I guess one could argue it's still on the upswing, but yeah, definitely. I mean, big companies, little companies, it's interesting to hear everyone adapting to different things. And, you know, as you know, there's a million communities, you know, for threat intel and, you know, things like the Cloud Security Alliance and, you know, different vendor communities where many of us collaborate and financial services, other things. And, you know, it's interesting to see what people are dealing with. That's why I said to you, you know, when you asked me about the, you know, what are you seeing in terms of attacker stuff, it's interesting to see what everyone else is seeing as well. And where it's, you know, everything old is new again type of things, or where there is genuinely a net new thing. You know, I think, you know, you genuinely see net new things sometimes in the nation state arena, but you definitely see a lot of revisiting of old techniques with a new face on it, you know, in certain cyber criminal type of realms or, you know, nuisance type of realms, you know?
Yeah. Looking down the road, is a paradigm shift of some sort underway that was brought on by this pandemic, impacting security? I guess security is such a broad concept, right? But
yeah, that's a great question, Dan. I mean, I think some of us have talked about, you know, do we ever go back to, for example, requiring everybody to be in the office? For example, you've probably heard this from other people. It's hard to get elite offensive people to all come work in your office. I mean, a lot of the people that I work with, that are hackers and ProdSec people, they want to work from home, and I don't blame them. I mean, it's like a coder. You could pretty much do your work anywhere. You can have your stand-ups, you can have your sprints, and so why would you come in anyway? And we're proving in many cases that productivity is as good or better in some cases. So, and I think the jury is still out on some areas certainly of security on that. But I think a fair question, and I've talked to some small company people, is, do you need an office in some cases? And do we actually need people to come back to an office in all job categories, or could certain job categories, could we offer fully remote positions? And I don't know the answer to that. Certainly I'm not speaking of, officially for my company in that regard in any way, shape or form. But I think when I talk up to my peers about things in general, that's definitely a question that people are asking. And I think that will introduce a lot of challenges for human resource professionals if, that becomes sort of a real thing that's put on the table,
Well, maybe we'll never have to figure it out. We could all retire because you can cure security for us, Eddie. We can retire to wherever is your background there.
Well, I certainly can't cure it because I don't have that kind of smarts, but I certainly think there are a lot of great, brilliant people in this industry, and I'm just pleased to still be a part of it. So,
and looking back to 10 years ago, I mean, the so-called attackers are always one step ahead. Do you feel like improvement has been made? I know a lot of people have maybe say no. So a lot of people have burnt out, or I'm sure a number of your peers have burnt out in this space, left secure. Yeah. How do you feel kind of looking back 15, 20 years about where we are now?
I think we've gotten better. Look, there's always, if you wanted to complain, right, one could always complain about something. But I do think that things have improved. I think that in general, we've gotten better at working with development teams. I think operational teams have gotten better at recognizing that it can't be siloed, that SOC can't be over here and everything else over there. I think, security leaders in general have come to realize that, that their role is not strictly a control function, but it really has to be part of the delivery of business value. And, it's still a relatively young industry, whether you want to call it IT or security or whatever. And I know you've heard that a million times too, in all the work that you've done, Dan, but I'm an optimist. I see a lot of brilliant people, not only as technical people coming up, behind all of us, but that also are coming up with the attitude that, that is positive, that is collaborative, transparent, and that, that's something different than the days when I started, where it was secretive and siloed and difficult to work with security people. So I think the general attitude in the industry has changed for the better.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And it is funny because it feels ancient because we've been in the space for so long, but you're right. It's just getting started, and people will look back years from now, look back to us, and we were, who knew, like the early, well, you certainly, especially an early pioneer, if you will, or whatever. So yeah, it's funny when you think about it in that context. All right, Eddie Schwartz, always an absolute pleasure catching up with you. Keep up the good work. And where are you right now? Where are you located?
In Northern Virginia.
Northern Virginia, okay. And what's your background? I'm curious. Is that?
I grew up in New York City. I grew up in the Bronx, so I lived there.
Well, that's in your Zoom background there.
Oh, that. This is Roatan.
Okay. I just been stuck in a New York City apartment for 6 months. So anytime I see water, I get excited, Eddie. So I just want to hear about it.
This was sunset in Roatan, Honduras.
Yeah. Okay. Very nice. Very beautiful. All right. Absolute pleasure again. Thank you so much.
Same here. Take care, Dan. Thanks for your time.